Hello and welcome to episode 31 of Subplot A Course, a podcast discussing a new science fiction work on the second Tuesday of every month. I'm Stavros, and with me is someone who could best be described as a teachmancer, Charlie. Say hi, Charlie.
Yeah, sure.
Charlie teaches math. Also with me is Vincent, who makes his living as a medical statistics mancer. Say hi,
That's Terramancer. Come on, that's the closest thing in the book. You Terramancer.
Really? I don't know about that.
Healthmancer, Terramancer. Come on.
All right, if you say so. And Vincent's an epidemiologist. And we're also joined by John, who is a missilemancer. Say hi, John.
Missilemancer. Hey, how's it going?
John is a mechanical engineer. And today we're going to be talking about Entromancy, written by M.S. Farzan and published in 2015. And what do you know? We have the author himself with us today to talk about this. Hello.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about your book. So first up, I'm going to do a bit of a plot synopsis, and it's always nerve-wracking whenever the author is on for this, so feel free to correct me at any time. I know, no pressure at all. All right,
waiting.
All right, so set later in the 21st century, the story revolves around Iskander Aradowski, a secret agent for an organization called Knight, an agency tasked with protecting normal humans against the growing threat of Aurochs, modified human revolutionaries that have cropped up over the previous several decades due to a resurgence in magic and these so-called underraces. Am I doing okay so far?
That sounds pretty good.
Okay, great. Aradowski narrowly escapes death during what he might consider a routine assignment, finding himself at the center of a conspiracy that he initially doesn't quite grasp the breadth of. In an adventure that takes him all over the San Francisco Bay Area, Aradowski eventually assembles a crew of Aurochs with their own unique abilities, unravels the conspiracy between his bosses at Knight and the King of the Aurochs, and takes the fight to them in a place none other than Alcatraz to defuse the situation and prevent a war.
Can you do my PR from now on?
Yes, I'll be sure to do that. Great. Well, at least I got it right. See, the thing is, if there's no audiobook, I mess up like 2/3 of the time. So.
One question though, is the main character's last name is like Aradowski. Like there's no K in the last part, so is it how would you pronounce it? Psalm.
That's right, Aradowsi. It's a combination, as you'll find in book 2, of Arabia and Firdowsi, which is
that's a full name, which you write in the first book, in this book.
Oh, that's great.
You
Should say actually
before
we dig into it that I have just put the finishing touches on book 2 and 3, so my mind is very much in that. So I hope to provide no spoilers of the second and third books.
It's okay. You can trust us.
If you do, our listenership will go up like 500%. It's like from one person to 5 people.
So many secrets.
It's like another 5 people.
I know, 500%. That's what I'm talking about.
That's right.
Big gains.
All right. Well, so let's jump into some
math.
Yeah, exactly. Let's jump into some discussion topics. So I will say, for me personally, my biggest reaction to this book was to me, it felt like a merger of several different genre types. So, for example, like the visual style felt very like Blade Runner 2049, kind of that feel to it. But like the whole Aurochs inclusion of magic and like the basically party, it felt like our Night Path was in a party, like a D&D style or a tabletop RPG style party. But then the plot itself felt very like Mission Impossible. Like you guys know, like how pretty much every Mission Impossible movie has a conspiracy of some kind in it that Tom Cruise has to unravel. So to me, it felt like a merger of all of those different things, like all crashing together at once to produce this book. Did you guys get that same sense?
Yeah, I think that came across in the book. I mean, you know what? I hadn't thought about it until you just said it, but that was a pretty good description of the different styles that are sort of coming together here. Although I'm a little surprised that the most surprising thing to you about this book was that it wasn't in audio form. I didn't know you could actually read.
I mean, I may or may not have had someone read it to me. Just throwing that out there.
Wait, Stavros is literate?
Yeah, Sam, are there plans for audiobooks for people with commutes that may or may not have time to read? Just asking.
Or people who are literate.
If you like the sounds that are coming through your speakers right now, then yes. If not, then no.
Okay, fair enough. So so I know, I mean, this is a science fiction podcast, so hopefully, thinking about it, like, okay, it's set in the future, and all of like the magic stuff is kind of explained with plot elements. But did you guys have a sense of like which genre this novel felt the most like? And then maybe Sam, you can tell us how you intended it after we kind of opine a little bit. So what do you guys think?
I think out of all the genres that you brought up, Stavros, I think to me the Blade Runner feel felt the closest to the one that I was close to, because it seemed that there was a heavy government kind of element and then the kind of revolutionary element, and that's what I kind of focused on the most. I actually didn't really think about it from the D&D party kind of situation, though it totally makes sense when I think about it in retrospect. But I was actually more intrigued and a little bit puzzled by like the motivations of the government in terms of trying to give San Francisco to the revolutionary orcs. I was thinking, I don't see what's in it for them. And then it gets clarified later in the book. I'm like, okay, now, because I started out really puzzled. And that's why I think I focused more on the politics in the world rather than the characters and their magic powers.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. Charlie, John, did you guys feel one way or the other?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is it takes place in San Francisco, which the book version of Blade Runner, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, takes place, and we read that a couple of years ago. So I'm not sure if theme-wise or story-wise it felt like one or the other, but just the similarities between those two made me feel very Blade Runner-esque. Though I do have to say, this is like the first one of these books that takes place in the Bay Area that hasn't like nuked San Jose into like a giant wasteland or something like that. So
that is true. That is a plus.
I mean, it already is a wasteland, so who cares?
Hey,
I'm just kidding.
Aww.
I'm just kidding, Stavros. I love you.
San Jose.
John, what do you think?
I think it had a really, for me, it felt more like a fantasy novel to me. I don't know, for some reason, just there was so much emphasis on like Ceridium and Oxidium and these mystical elements, and sort of a throwback to like magic restored to society, and a lot of the action scenes, and there's quite a bit of action scenes in the book, I think, just really lean heavily on those elements. It felt more fantasy to me.
If you took out the Agra the Destroyer who uses Entromancy, the rest of it felt sci-fi. But that guy in particular made it feel really fantasy, because it was just like, I use entropy and I kill all of you with it. It was like, I'm throwing like tacks and things out of my pockets and they're going to kill you. It's like, that felt very magical. But everyone else had like guns or like tablets or like swords and technomancy. I was like, okay, that's very sci-fi. But I see where you're coming from, John, especially with that guy.
Yeah. So what is the intention here, Sam?
Well, I think that's all right. I mean, there's a maxim that you should write what you know, and definitely where I sit and where I come from is this pastiche of cyberpunk, urban fantasy goodness that has like D&D thrown in for good measure. That it has like a background in things like Blade Runner and Shadowrun, and there's definitely I don't know if you guys have ever read the Croaker series, the Black Company by Glenn Cook.
No.
It's super cool if you haven't. It's a kind of like gritty fantasy series that follows this mercenary company, where each one of them could be like a D&D character basically, and that kind of novel mixed with like there's shades of Neuromancer and on the cyberpunk end, and then on the urban fantasy end, the Jim Butcher series with
great series.
Like all the magic that goes into that. I think like all of those kind of go into what Entromancy is, both as a novel series and as as a game, and everything else that goes into it. And I think in part of it, when I was building the world, was intentional to be like, well, let's see, how we can bridge different genres. But then the other part of it was the story that I wanted to tell didn't really fit in either genres, either in a fantasy world that had kind of like a high fantasy world that really doesn't have any description or explanation for why magic exists, or a full cyberpunk world where there really isn't magic, it's just all technology. So I think that the way the book straddles different genres comes out of both like my own background and interests, and also like the story that I wanted to tell.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let me ask you this, because I know you've put out the tabletop RPG based on the Entromancy universe. Like, did you write this with the thinking of you wanted to take it to the tabletop RPG level? So, like, for me, like the Night Path is the rogue, obviously, and then one of the characters like definitely a healer, and the the pitcher is like DPS. So did you have that in mind when you wrote this, or did it just kind of come out that way and you took advantage of that?
Oh my God, this is my favorite question.
Which one came first? Yeah.
This is seriously my favorite question because when I wrote the novel, the actual like process of writing the first book was relatively short compared to how long it took to like build out the world and the magic systems and like how physics works and all that stuff, which is like kind of a 4-year process. But when I was writing the story Bible for all the characters and how all the systems should work, I tried to conceive it in terms of a tabletop role-playing game, because I wanted it to have this internal consistency where like things made sense, and there might be outstanding questions like how does Entromancy work? Like why does that not take Ceridium? But have everything else be internally consistent in a way that you'd find in a role-playing game. Because when I read, I definitely have this experience where I'm like, well, I don't really understand how that guy was or that girl was just able to cast fire from their fingertips, and like now they can't. Like why doesn't that work now? So I initially conceived it as a novel, but I wanted to have role-playing systems that kind of backed up the fiction. And then when it was time to make the role-playing game, I went back to that early state of conceptualizing how the world works, and then built the role-playing game with a team to help me to do that, so that it felt natural in the world, but was almost like you just lifted the concepts in the book and put them onto dice mechanics.
Yeah, it definitely has that feel.
I read some of the reviews of your role-playing game, and people are like, "Oh, it comes with like a preset story that you can play through." And I was thinking, is it just book 1 of Entromancy? Like, that would be
Is it? What
Super not. It's called the Presidio heist, which is essentially you and your crew of mercenaries are dropped into the Presidio to investigate a building, a facility that was once controlled by Knight and has they've since lost control over it, and you're given like a mission briefing of what you're supposed to do. And based on the game is has a very heavily integrated faction system. So if you're working with Oricombe or with Knight or with this third faction that is introduced in the role-playing game, you can do things with the non-player characters, or you have mission objectives based on the faction that you're trying to align yourself with. So there's an opportunity to do like espionage with your other players and to like screw with the system and that sort of thing. So it's a totally new story.
How neat. And actually, while you were speaking about that, I kind of forgot to mention one other genre, which was like a comic booky kind of feel to it. And the most obvious of that being like Knight just makes me think of Shield, of course. So definitely, back to the genre question, it definitely feels like there's this merger of genres there. So let's move on to one of the most obvious aspects of the novel, which is the location in which it takes place. And we are all talking, all of us hosts are at least originally from the San Francisco Bay Area. And I think, Sam, are you originally from here, or you've lived here?
I was born in London, but I basically grew up in the Bay Area, so I consider myself a native. Okay.
Gotcha. And that makes sense, because there is a lot of very specific mentions of locations as far as in the San Francisco Bay, the vast majority of which seem to be in San Francisco in one way or another. So I want to know how you guys felt about this as we are all natives. And let me opine first. I am a native of the San Francisco Bay Area, but I'm from San Jose, which is like the populous 1 hour away stepchild. Yeah. So when we're talking about San Francisco, like part of me is like, why would anyone go to San Francisco? But then and then I was like, oh yeah, it's kind of like this like hipster foodie area that I almost never go to. But I know some of you guys have worked there, so I wanted to get your take on this. Did it feel very authentic and that kind of thing?
So I have actually worked in San Francisco, and hearing all the various locales of San Francisco, as well as the placement of the Knight headquarters on like Alcatraz Island, was extremely, it kind of hit home very much so, because not only that, but I'm a fisherman. So I have actually been in the bay as well. So I have taken boats out of Berkeley, out of Emeryville, gone past Alcatraz, out past like the Golden Gate Bridge. And I take the Bay Bridge to commute. So like, yeah, there's a lot of boating too. So all the descriptions of the Bay Area, just like it felt very good to me, because it was like, oh, the amount of time it takes to get from place to place and the distances were all spot on. So it definitely wasn't like fantasy in that sense. That was definitely more technical and scientific. And I really enjoyed reading about the city in that sense. I was a little bit surprised because I felt like there would be, besides the references to districts and to like certain streets, there wasn't mentions of necessarily like, I guess, landmarks I'm used to hearing about. Like there was no mention of like Willie Mays like park, or like like anything related to the BART system, or there's like, besides bridges and like major landmarks, it felt like a completely different world, like the way San Francisco had been envisioned. So I was very surprised by that, but also interested, because it felt like that's why it felt so different to me, that San Francisco that Sam writes about.
Yeah, it seems like it's supposed to be like, oh, there's been like another layer of development on top of what we're used to now. I think it's like mentions New Castro and a couple of other like newish districts. I thought that was effective at being like, oh, this is a familiar place, but at the other hand, you have the creativity to kind of let some more imagination in there in terms of how the city's developed, and with and the underground for the Orichalcum and all that stuff.
I found it a little bit distracting, especially the references to the highway systems in such gory detail, as if the highway systems of 2070 or whatever will be the same as they are today. I'm not really sure.
I think it stuck for a few minutes, John, on the previous system. I was like, okay, if I were to take the bridge, how would I take it to Richmond, and then where would I go after? And I was like, getting stuck, and I was like, wait, no, I don't need to do this virtual commute that every day. Let's just read the book.
It felt like that. It sounded like somebody was giving me their commute schedule sometimes during the book. I was like, this is really weird.
Were you thinking it became that SNL sketch, The Californians, where they just like, oh, you take the 540?
Yes.
I was just thinking of that.
Oh, yes.
So what's the idea behind this, Sam? Were you just trying to lend some credibility to that because you were familiar with the area, or what's the story?
It's probably me, like my id, like working itself out, having to commute all up and down the
Just like making everyone experience PTSD with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Every pothole on the 101. Oh God damn it.
Definitely. Well, it's unquestionably a love letter to the Bay Area and all of the specific nooks and crannies that one can find while here, while also trying to do justice to the idea that it's a brave new world, or maybe a not so brave new world, where lots of things have changed. The development has moved upwards as well as downwards, and my thinking personally is that 10, 15 years from now, trying to get anywhere in the Bay Area is going to be pretty much impossible. So what did the powers that be do when they discover Ceridium is they build up, and they build a second layer of traffic where people can use their anti-gravity boosted cars to drive in the second layer. And I think coming along with that, so much about being in the Bay Area is like driving places and going places. Right. Like it is very much the Californians, whether or not that's unintentional or intentional.
That's why people use boats, because they hate the traffic.
Pretty much. What I really want to do, and I haven't had a chance of doing this yet, is work with an artist or a designer to create a map of what the world looks like, or at least the Entromancy world looks like at that time. And like with topography and Orichalcum and just everything. And I think short of that, the best way that that kind of stuff can be consumed more organically is just through description, and experiencing what the characters are experiencing. So I think that's part of what goes into that.
My one concern is you're from Northern California, right?
Hmm.
Yet you say the 80 and the 280.
Wow.
I get this a lot, actually.
Sorry.
I've had this conversation with my like very San Franciscan friends who also who like look at me strange and say like, no, it's I took 82 and I took 880, and I don't know
Right.
if that's an East Bay thing as well as a LA thing to say the in front of whatever freeway you're gonna say, but I just grew up saying it that way.
I'm from the East Bay. It's not a thing.
Fair enough.
We have a common friend that also does
Hot
it.
take.
I had the same argument with him. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, why? Because now he's moved to Southern California, and I'm like, oh, you dumb Southern California person. He's like, no, I always said it. So,
He's gone native.
yeah.
Jeez. Okay, well, so let's move on from the Bay Area stuff and talk about the larger framing of the universe. So, Sam, you talk a lot about how you even do some background dumps, like paragraphs of like how exactly magic came about and who Arcs are and that kind of thing, and the presence of Ceridium and that kind of thing. So first, I want to go to John first, because John is the techiest tech member of this crew. And so, John, there is Ceridium in the future. What was your reaction to how it was portrayed in this book?
Like from
Like
a
it powers
technical
everything,
standpoint?
and yeah, just what was your reaction?
I mean, that would be very difficult to say. I mean, because it has like a mystical element to it, it makes sense that it could be infused in everything. Although it felt a little lavish to sort of assume that. And it felt lavish because it didn't feel sci-fi to me. It felt fantasy to me. So I'm gonna be perfectly honest. I really, for about 75% of the book, I really didn't like it because I had a reference frame that this world that we were living in was supposed to be scientifically based. And then when I gave up on that and said, okay, well, they found this material and magic's real and it has like almost an infinite number of mutable properties, then it makes sense. So I enjoyed the book a lot more once I sort of gave into that.
Yeah.
I mean, to chime in on that from a public health perspective, it's very hard to find like a fuel source that is also good for the human body without causing you to die instantly, right? So you can't like have plutonium, which could power a power plant and a floating car, and also sniff it and or throw it in someone's face and make them fall asleep, unless you wanted them to just die of cancer. So in that sense, I can see why John is a little bit hung up by the fact that this magical element Ceridium can not only give people magic powers, but can also power like vehicles. So like as a fuel source and an energy source, I can see that they're kind of linked in that they're just like extra energy to do things with. But that whole aspect of it being like FDA approved and people not getting like completely messed up, which I guess is the whole point of the book, because everyone turns into furries or like animals after elements of developing Ceridium. So it's like maybe it is like a chemical agent which does cause cancer and turns people into furries. Who knows?
You have to sort of give up on Ceridium being something that makes sense within our reference frame for physics. Basically, it like suspends physics is what Ceridium does, and I think that's probably the best way to explain it, because it has so many uses, and it's on the scale of like altering people's genetics, allowing them to conjure like numerous amounts of energy and at will. There's just so many things that it's used up for in the book.
John, we just read a book where you can see the future and teleport through space by eating spice.
We also debated whether that was a fantasy book or not.
Yeah, that's true.
That was the greatest sci-fi book written of all time.
I understand it's a little more jarring because this is near future, so it's like, okay, we're getting these vast increases in quote technology through this one thing, and I think it's in the 2060s, so only 40-something years from now. So I guess that's like a little harder to suspend the disbelief, but in the end, it's still the same thing. It's like magic technology revolution allows us to do stuff that's clearly impossible by today's standards.
And, just to chime in from my own perspective too, like a lot of the like Ceridium powered stuff, like just like A, it generates all the magic under races, but B, like because everything's powered by it, it just like it becomes this aesthetic element where Sam, you're able to say, ooh, his like Ceridium gun because it has glowy bits on it, and it just like contributes to this aesthetic of like the Blade Runner type aesthetic where things like because they are glowy they have power to them.
It's definitely true. I mean, it serves a lot of purposes in that respect, both like as a magic fetish as well as like the I mean, it's not hard science, obviously. It's the only science fiction that you can really ascribe to it is the setting and how some of the stuff is internally consistent. But it also in working out how the world works. I thought there would be an interesting opportunity to bridge what's like cultural memory, that like every culture has some sort of mythology about these other races or some sort of magic or some like supernatural power, and being able to bridge the future, like a kind of like future state where magic is present, and where also machinery and technology doesn't go away, so they could somehow be tied into this magical element as well. Tying that future with like this cultural past, I think Ceridium is what bridges that gap in the novel. So that's, I think, part of where that comes from too. But it's definitely like it is one of the most, if not the most, fantastic element in the book. Mm-hmm. Which is why I don't think the book sits well on its own in like cyberpunk or science fiction.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, part of the conceit is that there's some like, in the world, there's some historical truth to the mythologies throughout the world. Oh, yeah, that's what you just said. So.
Yep, that's fair. But yeah, just as part of the world building, it's definitely a critical component. And I can see why, John, if you're looking for a more techie, like, I mean, this, like we said before, this is kind of like a genre merging novel, so this is definitely more of a fantasy element than a sci-fi element for sure. Although, John, did you say your opinion changed later in the book, or is it just that whole element you just didn't quite glomp onto?
No, I think you have to just sort of give in to that. You have to give in to trying to make sense of it. I mean, you're not going to be able to make sense of magic. Although I really enjoyed the touchback to all the to a great, like, everything that Solomon just said, that about earlier cultures having these mythical stories, and being able to reach back into all of that essentially and pull it into the book's,
yeah,
I don't know, immediacy.
I mean, it seems to just kind of be the in-world explanation of why we get this mishmash of genres. At some point, you got to admit, it's just serving like a function so that's possible, so we can get this cool story.
Okay. So let's move on, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about the main character, our Night Path. Aradausi, is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, that's right.
Aradausi, got it. So as I mentioned before, I kind of got like a comic book superhero kind of feel from him, especially hilariously when he's he's escaping from the attempted assassination of him, and he's like, "Damn you, Stryker!" into the his comms. I was like, yes, this is exactly what I would expect from like a comic book hero. But anyway, so talking more about him, he's a member of Night, of course. I feel like, I got a little tripped up by him. I mean, he is on this super cool adventure, but he does seem to like forego his Night affiliation very easily, and kind of just forgoes everyone except for his local team. So the Inquisitor and the Daypath that kind of work with him. And not only that, he's like very, like, by the end of the novel, he kind of gets recruited by our buddy the Ark King. So he's like completely changes allegiances. I personally, I wanted to get a little bit more info on why he kind of is so, like, I wouldn't say eager, because of course they try to murder him, but like why he's, he immediately distrusts the orders he receives to come back to HQ, which of course saves his life. It serves this function in the story, but like his allegiances just seem like very, very able to just kind of bounce around, at the slightest trepidation. Did you guys get that kind of feeling from this, or did it seem to make sense considering the plot?
No, I did. I got the same feeling you did. I had struggled to understand his motivations, especially throughout the periods where he was sort of bouncing between allegiances and what was important to him. At one point in the book, they were trying to race back to save San Francisco, and but they didn't seem to be, in any big hurry to do that. As
He's on the 80. It takes a long time. We talked about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think my confusion in the beginning was that there are two characters that he interacts with before he defects from Knight, essentially, which is Stryker, and his two is his very good friend Madge. And Stryker actually in the beginning kept telling him to do his mission, even though it was very clear that the mission was kind of like fudged to begin with. So in the beginning, I actually thought that Stryker was a bad guy. And so based on those two characters, like you had two characters, one who says, do the bad mission, and then the second character says, don't go home. He like peaced out and never went back. And I was like, that's really hard for me to understand why he would peace out given just these two characters' influences. And I was furthermore like thrown off by the fact that Stryker was actually his really good friend afterwards. And I was like, oh my god, that's so weird, because now both of them are his friends, and one of them wanted him to actually go get killed, which was really crazy.
Yeah, Stryker kind of comes in and saves the day at the end too. Say hi to your kids for us, Vincent.
Yeah, they're both singing.
Yeah, indeed. But yeah, you're totally right. Like that Stryker kind of comes in and saves the day, but you definitely get the sense that they're like, Aradowski is just not having a good time really there with Knight in the first place. I don't know, Sam, do you want to weigh in? Are we missing something as far as his motivation goes as you intended it?
Well, I think there's a lot going on, obviously, in Iskander's life when the book comes around, and it's a relatively short period of time where all this stuff happens. But the two ways that I kind of conceptualize it, one is you're totally right about the comic book comment in that I have no visual art whatsoever. Like, I'm a musician, I can play instruments, I cannot sign my name and have it be legible. So part of the way, yeah, pretty much.
Anyway,
so part of the way that the novel kind of panned out, and most of my writing kind of pans out, is what would it look like to have a comic book on paper, and clearly there are different rubrics for comic books than there are for novels in terms of how characters develop their motivations and how the storytelling works. Definitely, you're not the first to pick up on that, and that's very much intentional in the way the book is written. So there's that, and then the other aspect of it is, I was really struck by, before writing this book, I was really struck by two of the books that I mentioned before, Neuromancer and, let's say, Stormfront, the first book in the Jim Butcher series. The way that they treat storytelling and character development. With Neuromancer, William Gibson basically pulls very little punches in describing his world, and he's uncompromising in the way that he describes things. Similar to, I'm sure you guys read Dune. Mm-hmm. The first time that I read Dune, it took me probably 5 or 6 tries on the first 10 pages to figure out what the hell was happening in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew about the spice and that was about it. And the world building, you just have to let it wash over you. And by, I don't know, page 150, you're kind of okay, I kind of grok what the politics are, what people are doing and why, and that sort of thing. And I think what gets lost, not putting them down at all, just in that type of storytelling, some of what gets lost is the motivations that occur along the way, because you're not really given this omniscient window into why characters do what they do, even if it comes from their perspective, because first and foremost, what comes is just the world that is just being presented to you without much preamble. So that's kind of, I think that's what was on my mind while writing the series, and then in revising it, kind of repositioning the world first, and then character motivation second, which is a little bit backwards. So I think that understanding the characters and their motivations, specifically Iskander, definitely takes the back seat to some of that other stuff, and that could be a flaw of the novel, or it could be an innocent bystander of the type of storytelling.
Yeah, but to me it seems like something that could really be picked up in the subsequent books. I know you said you're kind of putting some polish on the subsequent novels, but I mean, just share in between book 1 and book 2, what would you say is going through Iskander's head as far as his loyalties and his position, his newly appointed position.
Well, the second book, I can tell you, and I'd love to read you the story blurb to it at some point during this podcast.
Sure.
It takes up a year after the events of the first book, and the idea is that after switching allegiances, Iskander has time to really sink his teeth into like what his new position is going to be, how to deal with the shifting tectonic plates of the politics that happen in the world, and in similar fashion, he doesn't have quite enough time to get his feet firmly entrenched before a new threat appears, and the shifting sands are as such that I can say he's excited about his new position, but he has a lot of things to consider as old grudges come calling.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm sure a lot of people on the Arc world are not happy about random Night Path joining their ranks. I can certainly see that.
Yep.
Turning into an interesting point.
Yeah, making him the spy master of the Auric nation is as a former intelligence agent for the other side.
It makes him the best for the other side, right?
My wife was just watching The Crown, and apparently there's a character in it that I suppose is like historical fiction, but like based on a true part of the history, that he's like a Russian spy that was like in within the ranks in the British government, and like they discovered that he was a spy or something, but they weren't able to do anything about it, so they were just like, don't spy anymore, and like he just kind of like hung around.
Interesting.
This is in no way influencing the way that Iskander works in the Orcom, but I thought that was interesting, having heard that this week.
Yeah. No, I watched a documentary about that. Like, there's actually MI6 agents who are really Russian assets, but due to the way like the good old boy lord system works in England, he just got like hand waved into the position, and it was super sketch.
Okay, well, so let's move on to a new fun segment where it's going to be a little bit of a contest between all of us, and Sam, of course, even as the author, you are welcome to participate. And so the nature of this contest, we're going to each give a short elevator pitch for Entromancy. And then after we each give our pitches, we are going to vote and see who had the most effective pitch. And then maybe, who knows, Tom, you can use this as marketing for your series or something. Who knows? Depends on how horrible this turns out to be. Anyway, so
Awesome.
All right, so I'm going to go first, and then we'll go to Vincent, Charlie, John, and Sam after that. All right. Do you need a new book to read, but you just can't decide on which one you want? With the combination of the aesthetics of Blade Runner, the world building of Dungeons & Dragons, and the sense of adventure of a Mission Impossible film hit just the right spot, then I have a good book for you. Entromancy does all those things, plus there's a CCG and TTRPG if you hunger for more when you're done. Entromancy by MS Farzan.
Nice, Stavros.
Totally using that.
All right, can I vote to go like towards the end?
I can go again.
Okay, Vincent's doing his in a panic right now on the back of a napkin or something. All right, go ahead, Charlie.
Okay, so, well, I didn't actually make a pitch. I will have to describe to you my infomercial.
Okay,
So,
I'm
of course,
ready.
starts with
I'm ready for this.
starts with a black and white footage of some bad middle-aged actress holding two books, and it says, "Do you have trouble reading your cyberpunk future novel as well as your fantasy novel at the same time?" And as she's reading it, she's like dropping the book, and she goes, "I can't turn the pages at the same time." Says, "No worry, we have the solution for you." And of course, it does like the 90s transition with the sparkles, and it's in color. It's like, and she's holding the Entromancy book. She goes, "Wow, now I can read both at the same time." It's like, you get all the fantasy creatures you want, as well as all the new high-tech devices of the near future. This is great. If you call right now, then you can get a free Roomba. And then it shows Roomba in the corner, and it says, "I will not abide blood spilt on the carpets." And then it gives you all the fast talk of the,
Like the 800 number to call.
To spend your money, and clearly it's a scam.
Yeah,
Wow.
Just the commercial.
Was Sigil, the sentient AI hacker, actually a Roomba?
Ooh.
The Sigil of Sparks. It was a Roomba, right?
You will have to read book 2 to find out.
I feel like that's a yes.
No, that guy's a freaking Roomba. They fit the freaking memory slots.
Oh,
Can't
man.
be a Roomba. It's copyrighted.
It is a robot vacuum.
Trademark.
It is a disc self-propelling vacuum cleaner. It's pretty clear.
All right, so we got Charlie's infomercial based on the genre merging.
That was amazing.
Yeah. All right, John, are you ready?
Sure. It's not nearly as elaborate, but I got something.
All right.
Do all of your friends play role-playing games and you want to join, but you don't have the time or the inclination to actually build characters and make choices? Then try the novel Entromancy. No effort required. Available through Amazon.
Wow. Okay. So it's like it's an RPG, but you don't have to play it. Okay. I guess I could see that.
That's amazing.
I did see I was like, hey, the pitcher's basically a paladin. She can hit things and she can heal. Yay.
Yeah. Okay. Vincent, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Okay, so keep in mind, I did 5 seconds of prep. No big deal.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
All right, here we go.
Lies.
I like cyberpunk and I cannot lie. You others can't deny. When a hero walks in with guns on his waist and points a sword in your face, you get sprung. Bad guys acting tough. Don't they know that they're going to get stuffed? V-pens where we're jailing. Virtual prisons where they're wailing. Olina, I want to get with ya. She's a magic picture. My homeboys try to warn me, but that Ceridium you got makes me so horny. Yeah, fellas, yeah? Does Entromancy got the drugs? Hell yeah! Tell them to buy it. Buy that cipher now. Farzan got book.
Oh my god. Holy
Jesus
smokes.
Christ.
Masterpiece.
Wow.
I feel like we just need to end the contest now, but no.
That only took 5 seconds. Back at the napkin. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure.
In between handling, like dual wielding babies back there.
Why are you wasting your time in statistics?
I know. You could be in the rap game right now.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Eminem
Jesus.
right here. Asian Eminem.
Okay. Well, Sam, I know there's some stiff competition, but what do you have for us?
I don't really think I can follow that one up. I feel like the Magnavox guy in the who's like he's like sitting in his chair and like the sound's just blowing past him.
It's definitely a tough act to follow, but we believe in you. You have home field advantage.
That's true. I'm gonna bring it down a notch. Several notches.
Several
Time
notches.
for
Okay.
actual pitch.
Yeah, for an actual pitch, I'm gonna read. I'm just gonna read one of the editorial reviews.
Okay.
In this rousing science fiction novel, it's a futuristic San Francisco, and the element Ceridium has emerged as a renewed source of mythical power and otherworldly strength. Ceridium's side effects, however, unlocked mutative genes in the population, resulting in a secondary race called Oryx, who become threatening to the human population. Thankfully, vigilant cops like Eskander Aridosi are defending the races and reinforcing the safety of each. The narrative is fast-paced, and this is a promising launching point for the planned series. That's by the Book Life Prize in Fiction.
All right. I think that's pretty solid.
Sounds good.
Yeah, covers everything about the book. All right, so let's go down as if we need it. We're going to go do some voting in the same order in which we presented. I will go for... Oh, you cannot vote for yourself. I will go first. Sorry, there's just no way you can beat this rap. That's not an automatic vote for Vincent so far. All right. Let's go, Charlie.
Yeah, it's Vincent.
All right. How about you, John?
Vincent. Although he leans heavily on this particular song for many raps, so I just want to say,
It's the only rap I know.
Wow. Okay. All right. Who am I missing?
I will vote for Stavros. I like the elevator pitch that Stavros has. It's captivating. His storytelling voice.
Oh, captivating. I need to cultivate this voice. Just maybe I can make some money off of it or something.
Maybe you could read Audible books for
I mean, Tom did ask you to do a recording,
Oh, geez. Okay, Sam, how about you? What's
Sidebar, if you do want to do an audiobook of this, I would be totally down for that. You have a much better radio voice than I do. Although I hate voting against infomercials because as a policy that's really funny to me, I also have to go with Vincent and his rap because that was amazing.
It has a ton of references and everything. It's great.
It's amazing.
I concede. So
Wow. Yeah.
It should be at the beginning of the audiobook.
Well deserved.
Yeah, I feel like just printing the text and have the narrator read it in like a really flat voice. I think that would work out the best.
I'll send you the text. You can put it in the podcast description.
Oh, great. Oh my God, Vincent, it was a landslide victory. Congratulations, Vincent.
Ah, yes. Thank you for once in my life. Golf clap.
Oh, jeez. All right, so let's move into one of our final segments where we can give a summary of what we think of the novel, encapsulated in our best thing, the thing you like the most, and the worst thing, the thing you disliked the most about the novel. So I will go first. I thought that the merging of genres at first, honestly, I was a little with John at the start. Like I found it a little bit distracting, just like the sheer like obviousness of the like the comic book components. But once I actually found out what was happening, I found myself enjoying it a lot more actually, and it became my favorite thing about the book. Like every time a combat scene happened, I was like, oh look, there's like there's the Nightpath doing the D&D rogue stuff, and every time like there's the VR bulletin boards and stuff like that. Oh yeah, there's the Blade Runner component. So I ended up really liking that bit of it. So that's probably the thing I like the best. The thing I disliked, or the worst thing that I thought about the novel, I really wanted to see more techie bits, I guess. There are some parts where the Technomancer does the hacking and stuff like that, but like day to day progression of the main character, you didn't really get to see. Like there's hover cars and stuff like that. I guess I just wanted more, like the just some kind of more information on how the Ceridium was affecting the world and how it was more. I don't know. I just wanted more substance out of that, I guess is all I'm trying to say there. So that's me. Let's go to Charlie. What do you think, Charlie?
So yeah, I agree with you. Like at first going into it, it's like, okay, the conceit's a little obvious. But I think for me, it probably clicked a little faster where it's like, okay, he's using kind of an invisibility dust or something like that. And it has a little more of a real explanation. So from that point onwards, it's like, okay, the mechanics of it, yeah, it's kind of hand wavy, but it's fun and it works and it builds up the novel, and the introduction of the races or the under races and all that makes for an interesting conflict with kind of almost real world political consequences and that sort of thing. Probably, and so overall I thought it was just a lot of fun and pretty entertaining. But probably my one drawback is with the comic book format. I know it's super cool entering in like just straight action, but it took me a little while to kind of get a grasp of who Iskander was throughout the book. I didn't feel like until maybe even 2/3 through, I was like, okay, he's this guy with this kind of background. Like, I wish I had maybe like one chapter of him introducing like Madge and Stryker before he goes out, so I just had a little bit of a better grip of that part of the cast that is pretty key towards the end.
It was just a little
but otherwise, yeah, so I think when we were talking about him earlier, I didn't get a chance to talk, and I think that was my issue. Is like all the pieces are there, but I felt like I was kind of piecing it together after the fact, where it's like, oh, this makes previous things feel a lot more natural and make a lot more sense. So maybe just like a details ordering type of thing, but otherwise, by the end of it, I thought it all came together and was really entertaining and just a fun ride.
Okay, nice. How about you, John? Best and worst?
Oh gosh, this is going to sound a little bit like a repeat of your description, because I was in the same boat. I feel like after we've gone through a couple of these books, or many of these books now, I feel like a one-trick pony, because I kind of like a brooding science fiction opera, grand sort of story. And so, just jumping into the book, I struggled a lot with just the whole mishmash of settings. And I have to say, like, as the book progressed, I sort of gave in a little bit more to just, I think what you were trying to do when you were writing it and mixing these styles. And at first I was sort of angry about the moments of kitsch in the book, and then I sort of was like, now this is like the style of the book. I like it. I want more of it.
John has the rage disease. The rage disease. Now you gotta get careful.
Yeah, John's a rager apparently. Bad reaction.
So by the end of the book, I kind of understood a little bit about what how the story was supposed to progress, and it felt more and more like I could enjoy it. I could let go and sort of enjoy the fantasy elements of it. I could enjoy more of the doesn't take itself quite so seriously during a lot of points in the book, and I thought that was fine. That was good. What I didn't like about the book, some of the commentary and some of the writing in the book is completely banal. I'm so sorry, but when we're describing the SUV's ergonomically cushioned seats that are comfortably, embracing my exhausted body, that doesn't feel. That's not Chekhov's gun, okay? That's not necessary in the book, and it just really, it got my blood boiling in the book when I was reading it. So
got angry at those SUV seats. Yeah.
Oh, God.
There's a lot of anger there.
No, John's angry that he commutes without that comfortable chair. He's like, God damn it, I want that chair.
I'm going to be honest, I have a new baby, so I'm not getting a lot of sleep lately, so I could also be just generally unhappy at the moment.
It's not the SUV seats, it's just the new baby. Is that what you're trying to say?
It could be.
I don't know, Sam, do you have an immediate reaction to that?
No, I mean, I spend all my days on the internet. I'm fairly well versed with hate.
So sad.
That's sad.
It is the internet.
That is true. All right, let's go to Vincent.
All right, so
You have another rap for us.
no, I don't have another rap for you
Darn.
unless you want another.
Can you phrase your best thing and worst thing in the form of a rap?
No, I can't.
right.
Sorry, I got nothing.
That's all right.
Got nothing. The tank's empty. The rap tank is empty.
That's fine. Go ahead.
So I have to say that best thing. I have to say is the setting. Like I love it. Like one of my favorite authors is Jim Butcher, and I love it when there's sci-fi, fantasy, any kind of writing that's set in a place that I have been to or I currently live in. Especially, it allows me to see where I live in kind of a new light because I can do my commute and say, oh, that's where they had that fight, or that's where they had that big, there used to be like a king sitting over there or something like that. It's always really interesting for me to see literature about places that are contemporary and places I've been to. And I know that it really resonates not only with me. My wife loves books like that. She loves Dashiell Hammett. She grew up reading The Maltese Falcon, which is also set in San Francisco. There's something very kind of like nostalgic and like warm about reading a book about a place where you can go visit afterwards and be like, oh, I can trace back where all these locations were. And I really love that about books, which are creative enough to work in locations into their book structure. For me, the part that I probably dislike the worst, I was actually kind of curious about the Oricombe. First of all, I got confused about the Oricombe. I had a hard time reading it because every time I see the CH, I think cheese. And so I kept reading it Orchome. I was like, what type of name is that? And then it was still halfway through the book, probably because my IQ is low. I was like, Oricombe. Oh my God, it's not Orchome, it's Oricombe.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah, I was like, geez, Orchome? Sounds great. But then the leader of the Oricombe was Thogrun, which I was just thinking, that sounds like an orc. He's got to be an orc. Like, there's nobody out there who's named Thogrun, who isn't an orc. And I was thinking, but it's only been 2 generations since they've kind of started getting warped. So either their parents really hated their child, or just who names their child after an orc? Maybe he's got the tusks, but everyone loves their baby. I mean, so I was
that's his king name.
Why name him orc?
Yeah.
And the thing is, Thogrun just didn't seem particularly intelligent to me because I could understand by the end of the book the motivation of the government to give the Oryx San Francisco, which was basically, hey, we finally pull them out of their tunnels and we can finally nuke them or do something to them and kill them all at once, right? Made sense. But then I was thinking, why does Thogrun really want to have San Francisco as a capital? He's living pretty well in Marin. Nobody can get him, but he's willing to go and put himself out in the open where he could get nuked for a sense of a symbolism to draw people towards him to have a nation. Whereas in the beginning of the book, it felt like it was described that Marin had already become this international beacon of Oricombe. Everyone come here if you're an Oric, and humans were flocking there too. So I just didn't understand his motivation for putting himself out there at risk. So I felt like that was the part that kind of made me the most confused in the beginning of the book. And because I was confused, I was struggling at first to kind of really immerse myself in the book and just move on from that point. But otherwise, it was a great book. I loved it.
Tom, do you have a reaction to that critique?
Oh, I think it's a really interesting one. Half of it I can kind of speak to without getting into the second and third books.
Oh yes.
Um,
Spoilers.
Super spoilers. I would say, in regards to Thogran being like orcish, I would say that's better left for further reading.
Okay.
As for the for further reading, I mean, there's it's the part of the caveat with, and I was thinking about this, but in advance of the podcast, was the way I like to write is very much in like short fiction. Like I'm just never going to be the guy who writes a 600-page epic all in one go or in one sitting. Like probably
Wheel
when
of
you
time.
count.
Go.
Oh my god! I just read
Yeah, seriously.
Wheel of Time, so I was like, this was just a giant 180 where I was like, ah.
I wish I could stick with stuff like that. Like I definitely, there are series that I'm tied to and that I'll keep reading even if they're long. But like a series I've been eyeing for a long time. Has anybody read their fantasy books? Gardens of the Moon, the Book of the Malakazan.
Can't say I've heard
Furious
of
typing in the background.
Yeah, I know.
Vaguely familiar.
Stephen Erickson's Malazan Book of the Fallen.
No, I haven't read that one. I read a lot fancy though.
It's like it's a 10-book series where I hear that like each book is, I don't know, 700 pages, and
Wow.
you don't see a convergence of characters until book 3 or 4. Like it's that kind of
Wow.
thing. Anyway, that's a tangent to say like I'm not that kind of writer. So a lot of stuff that comes out in terms of the characters in terms of their development and some of the histories come later, and that's one of the reasons why I'm releasing book 2 and book 3 at the same time, because I really feel like all 3 books are meant to be read together, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I mean, ultimately, you're like it seems like you're trying to cram like the whole world generation and the action story into a single book, and I'm no writer, but it seems like a definitely difficult task. So I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, it is if you're like super ADD like me, and you're like, there's all these stories in this world, and there's a lot to tell, and there's a role playing game and a card game, but each thing has to like stand on its own. So I think that's part of the risk of writing shorter fiction, is that like what do you get to, and definitely the world building is at the fore. Which is not to say that there's not more world building in the second and third books, but definitely I was grateful that we've already established so many things in the first book and in the role-playing game that we actually bring into the second and third books, that it's like I don't have to spend as much time on those things, and we can get into more like character development and plot.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, well, Sam, actually, I wanted to give you the opportunity as well. If you want to tout the thing you like the best about your novel, and if you're feeling brave, the thing you're most self-critical about.
Oh, totally. And thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for the feedback, I should say. This is like, it's super awesome, just not only to hear the positive feedback, but I really don't take, I really do mean that I've been on the internet for a long time, and I have a very thick skin, so when I hear stuff that is like constructive feedback or criticism, it actually makes me really excited, because it's like, it makes me think through different aspects of the world that maybe I've already thought through, or maybe that I haven't, so it's all like really good stuff. And in that vein, the thing I like about Entromancy the most is that it is my first novel, and it is the book that I wanted to write for my first novel. Like there are a few things that I have done or continue to do which have come out the way that I intended them to be. So like everything in there, the cyberpunk, the urban fantasy, the like D&D, dungeon crawling, the crazy characters, the unreasonable magic ability that allows a former pitcher, a former female auric pitcher, half auric pitcher, to like throw a baseball that returns to her. Like all of that is in there, and so like that, I get really excited by the feeling that the book that I wanted to write is the book that came out. And I think the part that is the hardest for me, specifically in revisiting Entromancy in light of the second and third books, and this is very much a hindsight thing, is that I think it's for a bit a bit more investment of the reader from the reader than I think I want now. Because the second and third books, at least from my perspective, are much easier to get into. A lot of stuff is more explained up front, and it doesn't necessarily presume knowledge of the world, although some of the things are already set up for you. So, not that I would go back and rewrite it, but I feel like it's more on the William Gibson side than it is on the Jim Butcher side, if that makes sense. Jim Butcher I find very easy to pick up and read, whereas Neuromancer, I think it's like you really have to invest your time and your interest in the book. And I think that's the hardest part for me.
I'm with you there.
We have some PTSD from reading Neuromancer. So we did that.
Did you read for the podcast?
Yeah. Did we do that the first year or the second year?
I can't remember now. It was 1 or 2 years ago now.
Okay.
John also didn't like Neuromancer, so
that's true. As I recall, John hated that book.
Yeah. I'd rather have my fingernails removed than read that book again.
If you have any elements of Neuromancer, you were going to get screwed by John.
All right. Well, as we're kind of wrapping things up here, Tom, do you want to give us that little bit of a plot teaser you were talking about earlier?
I would love nothing more.
Please.
So here's like the back of the box. It's subject to change, but this is what is going on the back cover as my designer is working on it. The Night Path trilogy continues as old grudges come calling with hell to pay. It's been a year since Iskander and company saved the underraces of San Francisco from certain annihilation, and the Spy Master has been working diligently for King Thogran of Oricombe, who happens to offer great dental. A new threat appears as old grudges rear their ugly heads, forcing the former night agent and his companions to contend with a powerful form of wizardry that bridges magic with machinery. Technomancy.
Ooh.
The board for Technomancy Book 2 of the Night Path trilogy.
Nice.
All right. Sounds exciting.
Nice.
Maybe we'll have to force you to come back to talk about that too, whenever we can get to it.
I would honestly love nothing more. This has been real pleasure, guys. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much for coming on.
The bad guy has to be a Technomancer, because the bad guy in book 1 was an Entromancer, and the book is called Entromancy. So it's called Technomancy. He's got to be a bad guy who's Technomancer.
I like this is just making up these rules for books.
There are rules in D&D. You can't break them. Come on. 5e rules, baby.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, let's wrap things up there. So yeah, thank you a lot, Tom, for coming on. And yes, if any of you, the readers, have any feedback or suggestions on books we should read and discuss, you can reach us at subplotofcourse@gmail.com or on Twitter at subplotpodcast. And for next month, we're going to be reading Supernova Era by Cixin Liu. Say goodbye, everybody.
See ya.
Goodbye, everybody.
My Ceridium shot now, guys. See you later.